Welcome to another episode of Joe and the Fat Man. Penn State Local Media Day has come and gone, and that means that it's August, and that means that it's almost football season. This is being recorded 25 days out from Penn State's season opener against Nevada, scheduled for 3:30 p.m. August 30th on CBS at a newly renovated Beaver Stadium, not a fully renovated Beaver Stadium, but the stadium is going to look a lot different than it did a year ago. Myself and Kyle Fatman Golick were there at Penn State Media Days Saturday. Jay Hallahan was not at Media Days, but he is a regular contributor to this show, not just on camera, but behind the scenes. He's responsible for getting this out, and we always appreciate him. But Kyle, we were both at Media Day. My focus was on one specific position group, which I'll get to later. But you focused on the defense, but you moved around a little bit. Tell us about what stuck out to you about not necessarily what James Franklin said, because that's not the big part of Media Day, but what we got in the breakout sessions, which for those who don't know, for about an hour, we can talk to any Penn State player or coach we want to, aside from the true freshmen who are not available to media.
So I just want our fans and everything to know that we at Nittany Sports now refuse to put up photos of the temporary bleachers, even though that's what inundated all of social media from our peers over the weekend. But back to being serious. So for me, it was a very defensive, concentrated focus. But a lot of things kind of came up during the center stage that I took into the breakout area. So, one of the biggest things for me was when Jim Knowles was in the middle of his session, he was making a comment about and complimenting transfer linebacker Amari Campbell, but he said something to the tune of, he has a lot of the natural linebacker minds. That's something that you don't see anymore because there's a lot of converted folks that are coming around to. That threw me off, Jay. Can we start again, Joe? I'm sorry.
Well, what happened?
Jay sent me something. I read it, and it just I went completely blank. Let me fix my camera about that.
It,
Yeah, that threw me for a loop.
You're good.
well, you just pick up and then we can edit that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to start from the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. All right. So yeah, Joe, we got to media day. A lot of our peers were concentrated on the temporary bleachers that were happening at Beaver Stadium. We did not partake in that, because our colleagues and peers did such a fantastic job of letting all our fans and they know what it's going to be for them in the fall. But I took the reign and had a concentration on the defense. I really wanted to know about Jim Knowles, and I really wanted to know about the linebacking position, along with defensive line depth and, what the edge position was. And Jim had gotten up there during his time. He was talking about Amari Campbell, and he referred to him as having this rare trait of natural linebacking mindset and like instincts. And he's saying because it's a position where there's so many converted players, whether they're defensive linemen or safeties, it took me down a path of, if this is something he's going to lead off with, well, what is the linebacking position look like at Penn State? The base alignment for the defense the last few years has been a 4-2-5, meaning we've only had two linebackers on the field at the same time. So we'll go through that in a bit here, but also we'll talk to a lot of the guys about defensive line depth. I talked with Dion Barnes about that. You're bringing back only two guys that had over 300 snaps a season ago back, and if you want Alonzo Ford, I think he had 178 snaps before his injury took place. Very inexperienced line. Wanted to get a feel from that, and just get a sense of what the edge position for Penn State is, because let's be honest, guys, that is the new prominent defensive position that the best are going to be at.
Yeah, my talking was done exclusively on the offensive line. I'll have a longer form story on that up later this week. But I've had a few stories out there, one of them being on Phil Troutwine's future with Penn State. I asked him if he had opportunities to go elsewhere, and he said he had, but he quickly shut it down, and he's not looking to go anywhere else. He didn't rule out ever leaving Penn State, but he did say that for now he's not really thinking about it. And I also wrote about Penn State's offensive line depth, which Troutwine asked Troutwine how many guys would he be comfortable with playing in the Big Ten game right now, and he said 8 or 9, but he wants to be 10 by the end of camp. And if you do the math, there's 5 regular starters on the O line mainly, so you got 2 of every position right there, and that's pretty darn good. But something that Troutwine said that I didn't even really notice at the time, but listening back to the interview, I did notice it. I asked him if there were any parallels between this Penn State team, which many expect to contend for, if not win a national title, or either of the 2 Florida teams he played on that won national titles, 2006 and 2008. And he pointed out how, yeah, when Troutwine got to Florida, he didn't, paraphrasing him, he didn't mention Ron Zook or Urban Meyer or anything like that. But breaking it down, he alluded to the fact that when he came to Florida, they were pretty much a mediocre football program, and Kyle can attest to this. He started his career with Ron Zook in 2004. That's after that season, Ron Zook got fired. Urban Meyer comes in 2005, doesn't go great, and people are starting to wonder about Urban Meyer. And then 2006, they win the whole thing. 2007, Tebow wins the Heisman Trophy. They win the whole thing again in 2008. And it kind of parallels Phil Troutwine's coaching career at Penn State, right? He came in 2020, where Penn State was still pretty fresh off the sanctions, which really decimated the offensive line depth for a number of years. 2020 and 21 were pretty rough from an O-line standpoint, but 2022, things got a lot better, and the line has just kept improving under Troutwine, and now it might be one of the better lines in Penn State history coming in. So I think that position group and Phil Troutwine's journey as a coach at Penn State kind of parallels his journey at Florida. And this Penn State team, I don't know about like schematics and all that, but at least from a program standpoint, Penn State was a mediocre program a few years ago, just as Florida was, and now they might be primed to win it all like Florida did in 2006.
Yeah, I mean, Franklin got up during his time on the main stage, and he joked that a friend on the beat, John Sauber, was probably being looked at in 2014 to be the 5th offensive lineman, because he said he came there and he only had 4 offensive linemen. Now they're thinking they have like 20 to 22 offensive linemen on the roster. It's impressive the work it's doing, but when you talk to guys like Nick Saban and Urban Meyer, and you listen to them talk, and you want to know when the programs begin to turn the corner is when they get elite in the trenches. And right now, it's no coincidence Penn State is elite in the trenches. Even when you start going back in kind of like the first stanza of James Franklin's time here at Penn State, the offensive line cost Penn State in the absolute biggest moments. Go back to 2017 Ohio State at the Shoe, where Penn State had, 35-20, 38, 27 leads, like double-digit leads at the Shoe. And when they needed to get a first down, when they needed to get stuff from their skill players, there was no push up front being able to do that. In a lot of ways, I always say to people, the 2016 team was always kind of like a blessing and a curse, because they were ahead of schedule, but in that offensive line gelled well enough to get them there. But you could see when you get into 2017, 18, and 19, those lines weren't there. And consequently, in 20 and 21, that's when we saw everything bottom out. The job Troutwine has done and I think I said this to you on Saturday, Joe, is when you look at the landscape of college football, when you look at what a head coach has to deal with today, and even to an extent, even a coordinator, it's not like it was, when for, by all accounts, Phil Troutline should be wanting to move himself up the ladder here. But I think, according to your one article, this is where he wants to be. And if he wants to be that long-time offensive line coach, that is a big win for Penn State.
Do you guys remember before Troutline got there, Penn State had went through like 2 or 3 offensive line coaches even before he got there in the previous seasons too.
Yeah, and one of them's at Kent State now, I think, Lime Grover. So
yeah, Lime Grover's over there. And off the top of my head, I can't think of the others, but it's just the getting to Troutline is big. And Joe, when you look at that line, I mean, I did a column here for Nittany Sports Now about best offensive line units as part of this group. There's 2 units that always come up when Penn State fans want to talk best offensive line units. The 81-82 years in 1994. And you start looking at this group has a giant opportunity to enter that conversation. So, time will tell if they're there, but the makeup's all there, and the Joe Moore Award is legitimately in the sights of this group.
Yeah, the line really has everything you would need, right? I mean, you have that rock at center and Nick Dawkins, which every great line needs. You have 2 guys that I think are potential to go in the first round next year, Drew Shelton and Vega Ione, both playing on the same side, which every team needs. You have the rising young gun, Cooper Cousins, who could help out this year, but also puts the line, helps put the line in a pretty good spot next season. I think this line is in shape to be pretty solid for the next couple of years, even after Dawkins, Ione, Shelton, and all these guys leave. You have that young talent, and most important of all, you have depth, which Troutline revealed in saying that Penn State could potentially be 10 deep by the end of camp. But some pretty good football players are gonna be riding the bench a good bit, even if Penn State rotates, even if Penn State plays a lot of linemen, which we expect them to. And James Franklin said during his presser that Penn State probably is going to use 6 offensive linemen. So that's all at times what it used last year. But still, Javen Williams is a guy that didn't want to be a rotational player by year 3 as a 5-star. Alex Birchmeier didn't want to be a rotational player. TJ Shanahan didn't lead Texas A&M to become a rotational player. But that's what these guys are going to have to be in order to succeed in this Penn State offensive line. And when good football players start sitting on the bench more than they would elsewhere, that's a sign that you're doing something right.
And it's Penn State's about to enter a reload stage. I mean, and that's the one thing that they can sell to Williams and Birchmeier and Shanahan, and maybe even Cooper Cousins is on the bench this year.
Yeah, I think Donko's your starting right guard week 1.
Yeah, I mean, Franklin was talking about Donko, and his versatility, and I think Rucci's kind of setting himself at that position at right tackle. So, these kids could leave, but at the end of the day, they have to realize the golden opportunity that they have in front of them. They get the experience, and you never know when you could be thrusted into the spotlight. I mean, that's what Nolan Rucci can legitimately say. I mean, he was, firmly behind Donko a season ago prior to Donko's injury, and he really made a name for himself where he's set himself up and living up to his 5-star billing coming out of recruiting.
Yeah, and the guy nobody's really talking about here, I don't think, is Drew Shelton. People are talking about Ione because of his size and speed and that pancake against UCLA and what he can do physically. In fact, I was shocked that he wasn't on Bruce Feldman's freak list. People talk about him. People talk about Cooper Cousins, the player that he could be and might start to be this season. People love Nick Dawkins for just his story, how long he had to wait to become the starting center and really what he's done in the community away from the football field. James Franklin calls him the Mirror State College, and there's a reason for that. But Sheldon kind of gets lost in the shuffle there. I think a lot of that's because he hasn't really had a defined role at Penn State. Obviously, a true freshman. Didn't play most of the season. Then Olu Fashanu goes down. He has to step up and ends up starting the Rose Bowl and playing pretty well at left tackle. Year 2, Olu comes back. Sheldon doesn't play as much as a result of that. Year 3, he ends up starting, but I think gets overshadowed by some other guys on the line. But what really struck me is when Phil Troutline said in all his time coaching, whether it be at Penn State or Boston College before that, there's only 2 guys that burned their red shirts at freshman and are going to be playing all 4 years, and Drew Sheldon is one of those guys. So that really puts into perspective that this guy is a pretty darn good football player, and even if he ends up in that first round range, Penn State fans might not really notice it because he's a guy that just kind of quietly goes about his business, but he keeps Drew Allar from getting knocked down too.
There's a guy amongst us here who was at the NFL Combine and spoke to one Olu Fashanu, and Olu said something about Sheldon. And I don't know who. It wasn't me. I don't think it was Jay, but Joe, what happened there?
Olu said that Drew Sheldon should be better at Penn State than he ever was. So,
and Olu was selected 11th overall by the New York Jets in the first round. So that speaks volumes about Drew Sheldon. So, he might be the unsung hero, but you know what? We know that he's there. And, the fact that Drew's standing up, and this is a team that was explosive, in run blocking and also in pass protection a season ago. Sometimes when you don't hear the guy's name, maybe that's telling you how good he is because he's not doing anything that's getting any sort of limelight at him. And that's usually why, I think it was Keith Dorney who had the full thing going on, the Fraternal Order of Offensive Linemen. And, you don't get the credit you want or the limelight, but when you do it right, no one knows who you are because you're just there doing it. And I think that's Drew Sheldon to a T.
Yep. All right, that's going to do it for segment 1 of Joe and the Fat Man. In segment 2, we'll talk more preseason discussions with where Penn State ended up in the coaches poll. That's coming up on Joe and the Fat Man.
Joe.
Yo.
Can we do some more with my defensive talk? Because I think there's a lot of stuff there.
How long do you want to go?
5 minutes.
Okay.
And it could segue into the preseason talk.
Where do we come in the preseason talk? Sorry.
3.
Behind
the top 2 that will take place in C-Bus on week 1, Texas and Ohio State.
Okay.
That you knew they were going to rig it for them. But I think there's a lot of good meat on that bone with the defensive line and the linebackers. But a few minutes won't hurt.
Joe, I showed my dad your interview with Cooper Cousins, and the first words out of his mouth were, "Holy shit, that's a big kid."
He is. He was standing very close to the camera too, or maybe I was standing close to him. I don't know, but
yeah,
Joe's like 5'4", and Cooper Cousins is like 3x. Yeah.
Well, he just looks so much bigger from one year to the next. Like, damn.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of Jersey Mikes.
Yeah. So how do you want to do this?
So I would say you kind of tee it up for, as we continue on with some media day and continue some media day and then segue into some preseason stuff, let's talk a little bit about, the line, like the front 7 here. And, there's depth, there's
The edge rusher situation.
Edge rusher, being the premier thing, I think is where it should go. Right there. I would say, segue. I think that should be the topic is, because I have the DEU, the DEU out, and then also with that set linebacker, the transformation of linebacker U article. So we could, it's worth bringing that up, and it's really worth it as well, in my opinion.
Yeah. All right. Are you about ready?
Yep.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to segment 2 of Joe and the Fat Man. Joe Smeltzer, Kyle Fatman Golick, and Jay Hallahan here with you. We're going to talk about where Penn State came in the first coaches poll of the 2025 season. But before that, Kyle, just going back to media days, because there's a lot to talk about here. You wrote what I thought was a very good story on Nittany Sports Now about kind of the evolution of linebacker U and how, your style of linebackers that Penn State was accustomed to for so long, that doesn't really exist anymore. And as a result, Penn State is transitioning maybe to becoming edge rusher university. So talk about that and what you were able to get from Jim Knowles, Deion Barnes, and guys you talked to for that story.
So kind of how I alluded to in a previous segment, when Knowles dropped that sort of line on the main stage, that's where I started running off to and ran with it. I hit Dom DeLuca with it first, and I don't know if Dom was kind of ready for me on that one, but he gave me a pretty good answer. But I then started to talk with Jim. I talked to Deion Barnes. I talked to Dan Connor. I even talked to Dennis Sutton. And, with Jim wanted to assure us that, hey, you're going to see some three linebacker sets this season. And there was no doubt about that. I mean, when you're in a situation where, it's a rundown, you're going to see that. But, as he explained, you're in a position where offenses now are spreading out defenses. When you think of the great Joe Paterno defenses, the game was played between the hashes, so, and you had maybe 3 or 4 linebackers that were coming at it. Now they're using the very last blades of grass right before the sideline, 53 1/3 yards away. So you're going to have to augment the game. And this is where Dan came in, and, I went to Dan Connor because you figure out of everyone at linebacker U, no, he doesn't look up to anybody on the career tackles list. He is number 1. And we're real fortunate to have him. And he explained leverage. And I'm going to suggest that our viewers read that article because it's really I even put in, like, he was talking about how the defender in space is looking at the inside pad and using the sight and making sure they know who their protections. It's all schemed where while the game is spread out so much, there's that support, whether it's over the top or underneath. So definitely give that a read. But, I know Joe always likes to quote John Gruden a good bit, right, Joe?
Sometimes.
I think you do. And, he, along with many other NFL, analysts always say, and you're starting to see this in the college game, there's the 3 pillars that all good football teams have. You got to have a quarterback, you got to have an amazing blindside tackle, and you got to have an amazing edge rusher. So when you think of DEU, where I'm claiming is against linebacker U, first off, I do not want to be tarred and feathered in the cow pastures in Happy Valley this year as I'm trying to walk to the stadium. So please do not hurt me in any way. I know I'm a bigger guy. I know I can handle myself, but, I don't want people to think how blasphemous you're questioning us as linebacker U. Well, think about it like this. In the last 25 or 26 NFL drafts, it's almost a dead heat between D ends and linebackers picked by the NFL for Penn State. I think it's 16 linebackers and 15 defensive ends. So you're neck and neck. But where it starts to separate is when you start to realize in that same time span, 8 Penn State defensive ends have been selected in the first round compared to 2 linebackers. And your 2 linebackers are LeVar Arrington and Micah Parsons. I think everyone on here, will agree with what I'm about to say. Micah Parsons, the last 2 or 3 years for the Dallas Cowboys, has been a defensive end and a pure edge rusher tops. You agree?
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, you're an Eagles fan, and I'm a Giants guy, so we see Micah torture. I mean, probably more me than you, but
no, he tortures the Eagles too. Trust me.
Okay,
he's a handful.
So you can't deny where the program is. Denai Dennis Sutton had a breakout Orange Bowl, probably the best game of his career. He's amongst the leaders amongst all Power 4 rushers with quarterback pressures that are remaining active during that time. He is so smart. And Deion Barnes, please, definitely give it a read here. He talks about how different each of these players are, that have come through the program underneath him, where we really need to, both Coach Connor and Coach Barnes are great coaching commodities. And hopefully through these 2 articles that I put up, please don't judge it solely on the LBU, DEU situation, but look at what these position coaches, very articulate answers, very well thought out answers. And Jim Knowles at the end recognizes where linebacker U is. He recognizes that what distinguishes a Penn State linebacker from anyone in the country is they do everything. So, I highly suggest, I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but there's a lot of great insights. They talk, that you're going to pick up and really understand how they're trying to defend and be really good in space in this era of college football.
Yep, and Penn State's linebackers and defensive ends are a big reason why they are ranked number 3 in the preseason coaches poll, behind number 1 Texas and number 2 Ohio State, who are facing off week 1. I'm sure the voters have that in the back of their mind. Maybe not so much the coaches, but in the AP poll, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of writers are thinking, hey, we really want number 1 and number 2 to face off week 1. I don't know if that's happened ever, so I can't blame.
It'll be the first time if it goes down that way.
So I can't blame people for wanting that. And Ohio State and Texas are both obviously really good, and that's the main reason why they'd be ranked so high. But as far as Penn State goes, I think everybody knew they'd be ranked somewhere between 1 and 3. I think being ranked number 3 in the coaches poll, I know the AP is going to look a little different, but the top 5 teams or so should be pretty similar in the preseason. So I think it's a pretty safe bet that 3 is where they're going to be in the AP poll too. But we shall see about that. I can't believe I'm saying this. I also don't know if Notre Dame is getting the love that it should be with all it has coming back. But talking about Penn State first, what do you guys make of them being ranked number 3? Is it fair or is it foul?
I'm going to go fair. And it's, the teams above it, I mean, they duked it out in the other semifinal matchup. And I will tell you, there's a hype behind Arch Manning. I'm not 100% behind it, but Steve Sarkisian has proved that he's built a juggernaut of a program down there in Austin, and the talent is at all levels. It's extremely impressive. And then with Ryan Day at Ohio State, they seemingly reload. I mean, they lost a lot of talent last year, but you can argue that the 2 very best players in the Big Ten play in Columbus, and Caleb Downs and Jeremiah Smith. Is Julian saying the quarterback? Is Lincoln Kienholz the quarterback? We'll find out over time. But it's hard to argue that. And look, 1 versus 2 always gets everyone's attention. With Penn State 3, it's setting Penn State up very nicely. If they take care of business and Ohio State takes care of business, they too will be in a 1-2 matchup November 1.
I think it's fair. The thing with me, though, is obviously, as Kyle said, Ohio State's got two of the best players in the Big Ten without a doubt. So it makes sense as to why, obviously, Ohio State's going to be ranked very high. But, when you look at what Penn State is returning, they're no slouches. I mean, it makes perfect sense for Penn State to be in that top three. And I just hope that after that week one game, whoever loses will be behind Penn State, and hopefully the voters won't feel like they just need to interchange those two or leave them where they are, no matter who ends up winning that game. But it definitely makes for an exciting conversation talk to lead off into the season as we near closer and closer to August 30th.
I don't think that's going to happen. I think that if Texas Ohio State is a runaway one way or the other, then the loser deserves a drop. But if it's a field goal touchdown game and it's decided by that, I don't think Penn State deserves to leapfrog one of those teams for beating.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah,
I just don't. But this is unrelated to Penn State. And I agree with you guys. I think the rate ranking is fair for the reasons you've mentioned. But can somebody riddle me how Notre Dame is behind Georgia? I don't really like
They
that.
must really, really believe in Kirby.
Yeah,
that's about it. I would
have had.
I'll be honest with you. I probably, if I had a vote this year, and look, I know this may ruffle feathers even here. My ballot probably would have gone number 1, Ohio State, number 2, Texas, number 3, Notre Dame, number 4, Penn State. That's how I would have done my top 4, because I don't see Notre Dame regressing this year. I think they're right in the thick of things.
I think it's all part of the pedigree. I mean, how long Kirby Smart's been pumping out top 5 teams. That's why they want to put Georgia as high as they are. And I mean, you give Kirby Smart credit, but let's face it, Notre Dame is returning a lot of talented players, and they're even bringing in some top transfers too.
Yep. Well, it's all going to play out on the field. When we come back on Joe and the Fat Man, we'll talk about Penn State in the NFL, and particularly one player who is very unhappy with his organization. And I don't need to tease. You all know it by now. It's Micah Parsons. We'll be back on Joe and the Fat Man. Yeah, sorry to be abrupt. I just can't have this thing dying in the middle of it. I'll be right back.
No, that's fine.
Yep.
How you been, Jay?
Pretty good. Yourself?
Real good. Have you been writing anything over at Farrell?
I have been. I've been focusing a lot more on like the college football preview stuff, just the conference.
Please, if we're not following each other on X, I think we are, but
yeah, we are. Yeah.
I'd love to read some of your stuff.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, you give a read to those 2 articles that I was talking about, because they're really well written, and it's, I think, something that provides great insight. I mean,
I'll link them into the episode.
Yeah, I mean, give them, like I said, for me as a writer, they're there to me amongst my career highlights, for the fact of me being able to kind of get that content. And it's like, I
got to interview some prolific players. I watched I think just about all of them that I could.
Yeah, I was hard on myself. I thought I kind of sucked, but after rewatching them, as I was doing this content, I mean, there's a few things I need to kind of simplify, but I felt I did really well to get people to talk, because I think it's just from my experience dealing with these folks. They don't talk unless you kind of put them into a position where they have to say something.
Yeah. I liked the one with Dan Connor talking about Amari Campbell. That was good insight, especially because no one really knows what Amari Campbell is.
Yeah.
I mean, who's watching UNC games? So that was interesting.
My man Joe.
All right.
Joe's wearing a Steagles shirt.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
That's endorsed by one Jake Hallahan here.
My as I said to Joe the one time, my great uncle played for the Steagles. Steve Sater. He's a fullback.
Dude, that's awesome.
He knew Ali Sherman.
But funny.
I know who Ali Sherman is.
Funny story. So that uncle wanted to opt out of his football contract to play for the Brooklyn Dodgers, and the Steagles unfortunately wouldn't let him, and it wouldn't have mattered because he was drafted to the War anyways. But if he did play for them, he would have played with like Pee Wee and Jackie Robinson at that time. So how is Alabama ahead of LSU in these rankings?
Dude, did you look at LSU's offensive line?
No, is it bad?
It's worse than last year's. And last year they lost a lot. Like if they had Will Campbell coming back and a few other guys, they would be probably 3 in the country.
Uh-huh.
That's kind of where they're weak at.
Okay. I'm surprised they don't have USC in here. I feel like every year USC is in the top 25.
Well, Riley hasn't.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. At USC, he hasn't gotten it done.
But I feel like every year, even if it's just because it's USC, it always feels like, well, we got to put USC in the top 25 because it's the name.
All right. Sorry about that. We about ready?
Yep.
Absolutely.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to segment 3 of Joe and the Fat Man. Joe Smeltzer, Kyle Fatman Golick, Nittany Sports Now, Jay Hallahan, who's also our producer and writes at Mike Farrell Sports. We're getting in the NFL preseason season. The Hall of Fame game was played last Thursday, about 5 days before the recording of this episode. Training camps are in full session, and probably, I would say the second most prominent Penn State player in the NFL is pretty mad at his current organization. Micah Parsons, the disputes between him and the Dallas Cowboys, the Jones family, they're pretty well known by now, right? TJ Watt got paid, Myles Garrett got paid, Micah Parsons is right up there with those two guys on the edge, but he hasn't been paid yet. And not only have the Cowboys not worked out a deal with him, seems like they're trying pretty hard to piss him off with Jerry Jones saying things publicly. And I guess they succeeded because Micah Parsons wrote in a lengthy Twitter statement Friday afternoon that he wants out of Dallas. He wants traded. Now these things need to be taken with a grain of salt, because the Cowboys don't have to do anything. They don't have to trade Micah Parsons. They don't have to pay Micah Parsons. And B, we saw what happened with Myles Garrett last year in Cleveland, and yeah, he's not leaving Cleveland for a long time now. So, fellas, what do you make of this? Is it realistic that Micah Parsons does get traded? And I don't want to ask, how much is he worth, because that's a very loaded, complicated question with a lot of layers to it. But do you feel that basically, do you feel he has a legitimate gripe with the Cowboys? And do you see anything right from the Cowboys then, too?
So let's unpack this and let's understand who we're dealing with. And I'm not talking necessarily about Micah Parsons. I'm talking about one Jerry Jones. I think all of us here can agree on this. Jerry Jones only cares about keeping his Cowboys at the front of all sports talk. That is how he's managed, even though he's gotten rid of Jimmy Johnson almost 30 years ago. Okay. And the Cowboys have yet to win another Super Bowl, let alone I think they've only won probably 1 or 2 playoff games since then.
Oh,
That
they
is
did win a Super Bowl with Switzer, but I mean anybody could have coached that team.
true.
Yeah.
I mean, this would be the 30th anniversary
Yeah.
of Switzer Super Bowl.
Steeler fans know they won a Super Bowl with Switzer.
Yeah,
So.
but this is a owner GM that all he does is keeps that sports talk going. He loves that log on a fire, unlike any other one. And I think this is another one of those things. You know, I think he sensed it. He knows he's going to pay Micah. It's just he wants to make some dollar bills out of it too for himself. Like I said, it isn't like Myles Garrett who went into Cleveland Plain Dealer and took out an ad saying like he wants to go. Like that was the extreme Myles Garrett went. All Micah Parsons did was literally go silent, then put up a last ride thing with Trayvon Diggs about the midnight before he went on his iPhone, typed up, essentially his war and peace on why he wants to be traded, and then screenshot it and put it up on X. This is one of those things that he even knows for his star value, he got to be careful. Because if he's dealt to somewhere, and I'm not saying to Cleveland as in they are going to trade him to Cleveland because they already have Myles Garrett. I don't think they need two edge rushers. I don't think they even have the cap space for it, but I'm using Cleveland as an example. If he's in a situation where he's not allowed to flourish, think Randy Moss with the Raiders. That's it for those of us that are older like me that remembers that failed experiment. It damages his brand. And these athletes are so aware of their brand. This is raising money. I think Jerry Jones is being a little bit too much on the theatrics with it. There's no need to, Michael Person, I think was the name that he used, saying like he thinks he's a ranch handler, not a quarterback, attacker at the one press conference. I think this is one of those things that, it'll be solved right as the season starts. I think Micah Parsons is going to make a lot of money, but I think it's just Jerry Jones being Jerry Jones.
Yeah, I agree. I'm sure he's going to pay him, but we've seen him do it before. Like Kyle mentioned back in the '90s. Emmitt Smith had a holdout situation where I think he missed the first 2 or 3 games into the season. That was Emmitt Smith. And the one thing that Jerry Jones mentioned that really raised eyebrows was he brought up the whole Dak Prescott getting paid $60 million a year and didn't play in the full season. And I think that rubbed Micah Parsons the wrong way. But eventually they're going to get a deal done. I doubt they trade Micah Parsons. I don't think that happens. Just like I doubt that Washington trades away Terry McLaurin. Like I think everything's going to get solved. It's just
Steelers could use Scary Terry.
Yeah, they could, and
that's not gonna happen.
And they could even use Micah Parsons rushing off the edge with T.J. Watt. So there's so many different things you could really go into those avenues about with Jerry Jones getting on Micah Parsons, and I just think it's silly, and I don't know why he does it, but hey, if he wants to continue to run his team to the ground, be my guest.
So Jay, you're telling us right now that Howie isn't going to go to another NFC East rival and fleece a Penn State product to Philly, right?
No, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that the Cowboys would even allow that to happen.
Not a chance. Some other Penn State NFL news. Saquon Barkley declined to be on one of Donald Trump's task forces. Cowie wrote about that. DeAndre Lambert-Smith had a pretty good Hall of Fame game with a touchdown catch. Abdul Carter's looking pretty good in training camp. Obviously, none of this is really anywhere close to the headlines that Micah Parsons made. But what sticks out to you guys about some other things that surround Penn State in the NFL right now?
I'll let you go, Jay.
Well, I think when you look at what Penn State has had coming into the NFL the last couple of years, looking at the edge rushers that have been entering into the years or entering into the NFL, as Kyle alluded to earlier, and Abdul Carter looks like he's going to be an absolute menace to tackles. And I'll be the first to say it. I'm an Eagles fan, but we are not going to be dominating the Giants' defensive line in total like we did the last couple seasons, just because I think Abdul Carter is going to be that big of a force along the Giants' D line. I mean, it's something when you can say that a rookie goes in to a team and you just take one look at them and you're just like, damn, that is going to be scary. But then you actually see clips of them and then you're really like, damn, that's going to be even more scary. So I feel like Abdul Carter is the main talking point here. I think you look at the next couple seasons or this upcoming season, I think he's a shoo-in for Defensive Rookie of the Year because of what he has next to him and Dexter Lawrence and then even Brian Burns, although he's rushing off the opposite side. But yeah, Kyle, what do you think?
So I'm going to go a completely different direction because I'm pretty good at going completely different directions. And how can you not love what you're seeing in Indianapolis with Tyler Warren? I mean, everything that I've seen come out of Indianapolis is they are extremely happy to have him at tight end, and he's made a lot of great plays in the highlights that we've seen. I think for a team that got absolutely nothing in out of the tight ends a season ago, they're going to leverage Tyler Warren like no other. He'll be like a good complement to Jonathan Taylor. Hopefully that helps Anthony Richardson out there or whomever's their quarterback. I'm really liking what I'm seeing from Tyler Warren.
Absolutely.
All right, we're rounding third and headed for home on Joe and the Fat Man. Segment 4, as always, we're ending with the box of mystery. Don't go anywhere.
That was a fun little segment.
Yeah, YouTube, we've made $84 over the past 28 days, which is up from like 28 a few days ago.
There was a lot of videos that was put out. Oh, did you guys see every time Notre Dame, you mentioned Notre Dame on here, I put it as a tag and views just go crazy for that.
Dude, if you need me to start burying Notre Dame, just let me know. I have no problem doing it and having Notre Dame fans being like, F you.
Did you see what LSU did, having that tower for no reason in the first scene of the clip?
No, wait, what?
So LSU did they did a hype, like a preseason hype video or whatever, and the first shot for some reason was just one of those football towers, and Brian Kelly had that thing in Notre Dame where the kid fell off the tower. But the tower served absolutely no purpose in the LSU video. It was just there. And then they took it down, which was dumb to take down because I don't think anybody really noticed it until they deleted it. It's funny to think that it was like some intern was probably just like trying to be hilarious.
Yeah, right.
But all right, we ready?
Mm-hmm.
3, 2, 1. Fourth and final segment of Joe and the Fat Man. Joe Smeltzer, Kyle Fatman Golick, Jay Hallahan. As always, it's Box of Mystery time. For those who don't know, tell them, Fat Man.
I don't know if I'm a good mime or not, but the good old Box of Mystery is a random potpourri. It doesn't necessarily have to be Penn State, but it's a random subject that Joe and Jay have no clue about, but I do, and I ask them, and you get their utmost raw reactions to it. So this week is kind of a little bit more on a breaking business news front, but we're going to tie it into what we all do as a little bit of journalism. So prior to us filming this on, as Joe would indicate, on August 5th here at around, 8 o'clock, ESPN acquired the NFL Network and rights to NFL Red Zone. In exchange, the NFL gets an equity stake out of ESPN. So for a lot of us coming up here in the fall, ESPN is offering their standalone app for $30 a month, where it's going to offer all its content here. So that looks like a big, big boon. So this is a triple play here. Good old box of mystery. Number one, what is your initial thoughts of this arrangement that has transpired? Number two, at myself as an avid Red Zone watcher, I don't know if Joe and Jay, you are. Red Zone has been absolutely fantastic. And ESPN has said that they're looking to put on ads on NFL Red Zone, which goes against everything we've been accustomed to for 11 years of ad-free football for 8 hours straight and watching Scott Hanson not being able to go to the bathroom. What's your feel on that? And can ESPN make it better or worse? And the last thing, which I think everyone on here has some journalistic integrity in them, how do we take ESPN seriously on their NFL content, considering the NFL now has an ownership stake in this media organization?
I don't really like any of it, to tell you the truth. It's hard to take. There's definitely going to be some problems, I think, with ESPN owning NFL Network. That's going to take away some objectivity. But just look at what ESPN is right now in its NFL coverage. They employ former players above journalists, and former players aren't going to be objective at all. Robert Griffin's not objective. Ryan Clark isn't. All of these guys, and even some of the media members, are so reliant on relationships with coaches and players that they're not going to be objective either. McAfee certainly is not objective, and he's the face of ESPN. So I don't like that at all. As far as Red Zone goes, same type of deal. If you're going to have commercials, what's the point? And I certainly, as long as Scott Hanson's able to still shine, hopefully it keeps some semblance of it. But if we get quote unquote guest appearances from the Stephen A. Smiths of the world, no, I don't like it at all. It's just a sign of where sports media is going, unfortunately. Journalistic norms are thrown out the window. You got people rooting for teams in the press box. You've got softball questions. You got people being overly defensive of athletes and always taking the player's side, no matter what. I don't really like any of it. So,
Jay,
I think Joe kind of said it the best there, and it's tough to follow. No, I agree with literally everything Joe just said. ESPN has become kind of a shell of what it was and what made it great back in the early heydays and throughout the 90s and even into the 2000s. They have, I think, really garnered towards two sports, which is the NFL and the NBA. I believe Sunday Night Baseball is no longer going to be in existence, so that's out the window. They've tried to up their hockey coverage, only it's really not much better than what you get on TNT or even your local TV station. So, I'm not a huge fan of ESPN doing this. Obviously, I groaned when Kyle just mentioned that they're going to now put ads on Red Zone. That's what made Red Zone great. I mean, the fact that the NFL media rights has been just so behind in trying to get every single game or a majority of games on network television, on cable television throughout the last couple, years. And you had Red Zone where you could go from game to game and Scott Hanson can, freak out over some play while he's probably holding in, having to use the bathroom, made it entertaining. And now to see that, like Joe mentioned, there's going to be guest appearances. This is essentially going to be like the Manning cast, I'm assuming, that they're going to, try and pump that in there. And listen, I don't know if I could be any more blunt about it, but again, it just feels like it's another example of ESPN trying to do everything they can to be able to create the quick dollar and keep up in media content that they seem to have been lacking in over the last couple of years. Because let's face it, people are not tuning into SportsCenter anymore. People are not tuning into their shows to watch their content. They want to go to Barstool. They want to watch, whatever on whatever Fox has and whatever else have you, or podcasts and stuff. So ESPN's doing whatever they can to keep up.
So, from the big grand scheme of things, ESPN has been hemorrhaging money for a long time. They made a lot of investments into getting every major sport that they could, but what they didn't anticipate was the cord cutting, and that's because when you look at your cable bill, whether you like ESPN or not, you paid for ESPN. That's part of why, people like myself, your parents, et cetera, those people that are watching, you get it, you pay for ESPN whether you wanted it or to consume it or not. And this era has really hurt and took a dent in ESPN. The quality of programming has gone down. The lack of journalists have gone down. I sat at the Big Ten championship this past December beside an ESPN writer. I'm not going to mention them on the air and this individual indicated to me that it's not like it used to be, and you can see it. Like when you look at the programming, everything is a copy and paste of whether it's First Take or PTI. So It's horrible. From a journalistic perspective, ESPN has little to no journalism. Journalism is, Joe, I mean, I don't see a lot of journalism in the mainstream anymore. You start going into these outlets like Vice and other things for news, and then even with sports. I would hope our audience thinks that Joe Smeltzer and Kyle Golick, Austin Bechtold, and any of Jared Pruger and all our other writers and contributors, that we try to be journalists. When we go out to get news, we try to ask the hard questions. We try to get the information for you. We're not compromised anyway. Like, I love Penn State, but you know what? I'm not going up there and, kissing James Franklin's butt. I'm going to ask him the hard question because that is what you, the fan, want. I looked at what, I don't know if Joe or Jay, do you remember the ESPN show Playmakers, or even heard of it?
Yeah.
So that basically was kiboshed by the NFL because it was really down to life what it was like to be in the NFL. I consider it, if you've never seen it and you see it on DVD, because it's probably never going to be able to be streamed because the NFL hated it so much, get it. It was extremely well done. I don't know what ESPN has done well. I mean, look at their influence in between all the major networks, to be honest with you, with college football. I don't like the direction that this is going. I don't like the NFL owners also themselves, instead of them being football people that are trying to have like a franchise that, benefits their community and within this nation. These billionaires are starting to turn this into something that it's not. Like, how many international games?
Yes.
It's only a matter of the time before the Super Bowl's not over the air, and it's in, it's going to be pay-per-view. You think I'm crazy? Look at the stuff that's transpired. You could probably then say, okay, I can see that coming. So, kind of rounding third and heading to home on this box of mystery, Joe. I'm not a fan of any of this, but there is that part of me that's curious about the $30 standalone app. I may have it, on my iPad, when we're up there in the press box at Beaver Stadium, and we can partake and take a look at it and see if it's any good. I'm going to reserve judgment on that, but I hope they don't mess with the red zone too much. I mean, that's a winning formula right there. So if they can figure out how to properly monetize it and give the same experience, they're going to make a lot of money.
Yeah, they also have Inside the NBA now, which good luck giving Charles Barkley a filter, but yeah, that's gonna do it. From our listeners, from whether it's in Pittsburgh, State College, Philly, San Antonio, Galveston, Texas. We appreciate it. For Kyle Fatman Golick and Jay Hallahan, I'm Joe Smeltzer signing off on the latest edition of Joe and the Fat Man.
Good night, Canada.